Part 42. I Can See the Laws of Things. Author, Yi Tiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 411. At this moment, in the outer hall on the first floor of the Emperor Tian Palace, Yi Zhan also had a complex look in his eyes. Being chosen by Lin En as the head of the army and entrusted with important tasks for so long, Lan 11 really has her own strengths. It is said that Lan 11 was selected to take office, but Yi Zhan is very clear that this so-called selection is just a formality. A more fair form for everyone in the Emperor Tian army. Once Lan 11 does not satisfy Lin En after this, Lin En can replace her at any time. At this moment, even Yi Zhan's eyes flashed with some enthusiasm, and there was a strong admiration and relief in it. Seeing that the head of the Emperor Tian army is so outstanding and protecting Lin En, Yi Zhan is very happy in his heart. What a good one, what is there to fear? In this case, I will fight the public opinion of the world with the Emperor Tian army today. Yi Zhan laughed 3 times with some heroism, and then strode out of the door and came directly to the door of the Emperor Tian Palace. As soon as Yi Zhan came out, the people in front of them became even more excited. Deputy Commander. Where is Lord Lindy? The Deputy Commander has come out, we want to see Emperor Lin. Where is Emperor Lin? Come out. Facing the excitement of the crowd, Yi Zhan slowly rose into the air and stopped at a height of 3 or 4 floors, with a hint of majesty on his face. Having been in the position of Deputy Commander for so long, Yi Zhan naturally also possessed the unique pressure of a superior. I am Yi Zhan, the Deputy Commander on the ground. You are all the people of my promised city, and you naturally know where the Emperor Tian Palace is. But now you are gathering together and surrounding it. What does this mean? Do you know that you are disrespecting Lord Lindy? Yi Zhan's voice, mixed with the power of deep cultivation, rumbled in the sky of the entire promised city. As these words came out, the crowd was silent for a moment. But the next second, it was an even more surging wave. We want to see Lord Lindy. What's the point of you coming out? Go back. We want to see Lord Lindy, not you. We only want to see Lord Lindy. The waves formed by millions of people are so terrifying that they rush over in an instant. Even Yi Zhan still feels great pressure. You surrounded the Emperor Tian Palace, which is a provocation to Lord Lindy. The promised city has its own order. Do you all want to be punished? Gathering to make trouble? Do you think your head is in the way? Go back. We only want to see Lord Lindy. There are so many of us, do you dare to cut us? We are all civilians, and everyone in the city is here, what can you do? The endless boiling is just like boiling water, and it can't be suppressed at all. Yi Zhan couldn't help but get angry, and the buzzing sound that kept echoing in his ears made him extremely irritated. Especially the countless 3 words "go back," which were like slaps in his face. Yi Zhan's face finally darkened, and his words were filled with murderous intent. How dare you? Shut up. Lord Lindy has saved mankind from danger many times, but now you dare to surround Di Tian Palace. You are a bunch of ungrateful things, you are so bold. Are you forcing Lord Lindy? Ah! White-eyed wolves. You are all white-eyed wolves. What do you want to do? Are you going to rebel? As he spoke, Yi Zhan was obviously furious, and his cultivation power could not help but stir up. With the cultivation of the Divine Emperor, Yi Zhan's anger darkened the whole sky. The sky suddenly changed, rolling black clouds pressed down, and gusts of wind and clouds swept the sky. The appearance of such a scene immediately made many people tremble in their hearts, and finally some rationality appeared in their eyes. Many people finally began to realize what their actions meant. Surrounding Di Tian Palace. What kind of behavior is this? This is a direct challenge to Emperor Lin. However, at this moment, there are still voices coming from the crowd. Deputy Commander, what are you doing? You dare to massacre the people in public. We just want to see Lord Lindy. What are you doing? We just want Lord Lindy to clarify the rumors. Deputy Commander, you want to kill us. Such a voice suddenly made many people feel the same way, and more people began to respond. What did they do wrong? Yi Zhan's face was extremely ugly, and it was obviously on the verge of an explosion. This group of people surrounded the Emperor Tian Palace, which was simply a riot and rebellion. They even had the nerve to ask him what he did wrong. At this time, suddenly there was a wave of fluctuations in the space. Black leather jacket, long flowing hair. It was Lan 11. Lan 11 was in the air, not far from Yi Zhan, with a frosty face under her beautiful face. Okay. Be quiet. I am the commander of the Emperor Tian Legion. Lan 11's voice was full of coldness, and it was also blessed with the power of cultivation. Although the sound was not loud, it was transmitted very far, very far. When this sound appeared, many people couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts, as if the temperature between heaven and earth had dropped a lot. For a moment, this place actually became quiet. Under the gaze of millions of people, Lan 11's face was as cold as ice, and he spoke coldly. This farce has lasted until now, and it's almost time to end it. Some people with bad intentions, I hope you will shut up and stop inciting people. I know that most of you really want Emperor Lin to come forward to clarify the rumors, and you don't have any ulterior motives. Therefore, the Emperor Tian Palace will not convict you of gathering to cause trouble, and will just treat you as ignorant. Regarding your questions, I will explain here as the head of the army. Please use your brains to think about it. With Lord Lin's cultivation, status, and state of mind, do you think Lord Lin will take a mere rumor to heart? To be realistic, based on how can you understand Lord Lindy's will? Lord Lindy is not in the Emperor Tian Palace now. According to the last time Lord Lindy contacted me, he is in seclusion in Zhu domain to impact a new realm. Lord Lindy is in the godly wilderness, so I don't need to say more about the new realm. Now, put away your ridiculous thoughts and use your brains to think about what you are doing now and what kind of place you are facing. Lord Lindy has a great favor to all of us. Do you respond to his favor like this? What is in your heart? I can see the laws of things. Author, Yi Tiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 412. Lan 11's voice has always maintained a gentle and somewhat cold tone. Combined with Lan 11's reputation as a cold rose, the momentum of this Legion commander can be said to be fully displayed. He is still a cold rose Legion commander. For a moment, surprisingly, Lan 11 actually intimidated these civilians. Lan 11's voice and expression did not change, and her expression was still quite majestic. Okay, I have said everything I want to say. Now, everyone, you can retreat immediately, starting from the outermost people, and gradually evacuate. Lan 11's tone was full of a sense of right and wrong, just like the Queen's order. And the magical thing is that after hesitating for a while, the outermost people really began to retreat. Lan 11 couldn't help but feel relieved. She looked majestic, but in fact she was still a little nervous. Although she led the Emperor Tian army, it was the first time that she saw the scene that everyone was pointing at. It's really not that easy to be the Legion commander. Lan 11 smiled secretly, as if she was a little self-deprecating, but then she became relieved. With such thoughts towards Emperor Lin, it was naturally unrealistic to want to get a title easily. What she had to do was not just to be a Legion commander, but to treat the Legion as her own. In this situation, she could have handed it over to Yi Zhan, but now she chose to stand up and bear the eyes of the world. Just because this world is Lin An's world, just because Emperor Tian Palace is Lin An's Emperor Tian Palace. Just when the people in the outermost circle finally began to move, a voice suddenly emerged from a corner of the promised city. Wow! Legion Commander, you are so powerful. If you don't know, you would think that some big shot came out to oppress the people, and even wanting to meet Lord Lin can be accused of treason. Little did you know that this big shot is actually just the Legion commander of a Legion. A Legion commander wants to suppress this vast public opinion with just a few words. The voice also roared in the world, causing a change in the wind and clouds, and the black clouds above the sky began to roll violently. Countless people were startled. After hearing the content of the words, the figure who was about to leave stopped again. It was like he was going to watch the fun. Lan 11's expression did not change much, but it could be felt that the temperature between heaven and earth suddenly dropped a few points. There seemed to be a real coldness in Lan 11's eyes. On the side, Yi Zhan's eyes also changed, and a trace of murderous aura began to gradually surface. At this moment, a thought rose from the hearts of the two people at the same time: the real master is here. Although the person in front of them could not be the real person behind the scenes, he was far from being comparable to the ordinary people below. Just by listening to the voice, the two could hear that the other party was also the God Emperor. Lan 11 looked in a certain direction from a distance, and her cherry lips slightly opened. "Who is this rat? You have the courage to hide aside and speak nonsense, but don't you have the courage to let everyone see your face?" Not long after Lan 11's voice came out, there was a chuckle suddenly. The faint laughter seemed to have endless confidence, showing the other party's carefree state of mind. The next moment, the space fluctuated, and a figure suddenly appeared not far from the Emperor's palace. The man was dressed in brocade and looked quite noble, with a little beard on his chin. This is a middle-aged man. There seemed to be a faint smile on his face, and his expression seemed to be a little playful. "Since the commander ordered me to show up, I dare not hide any more. But it is a bit unrealistic for the commander to use his status to suppress public opinion. I am not talented, but I want to see Lord Lin smash the rumors with my own eyes, just like everyone else." Lan 11 looked a little murderous. "Gu Ling, didn't you hear what I said just now? Lord Lin is not in the Emperor Tian Palace. What will you do?" Gu Ling couldn't help but smile slightly. "I know that you are upright, but it doesn't mean that others know it. You said Lord Lin is not here, so he is not here? You think too highly of yourself. How dare you?" Yi Zhan shouted loudly, and the aura of the God Emperor suddenly swelled up. In an instant, there was a storm here, and the wind swept through. In the center of the violent storm, Yi Zhan's clothes were flying all over, and a strong murderous aura burst out of his eyes. "Gu Ling, you are so brave. Are you tired of living, or are you tired of living in the whole Gudeo tribe?" These words were like thunder, rumbling and echoing in the world, and countless people could not help but change color. The storm has begun. The countless people below were staring up at the mighty gods in the sky, and their faces were all shocked. There are only a handful of God Emperors in the world, and they are just ordinary people. How can they not panic under the pressure of such God Emperors? There are also many people with active minds who can see some clues from the situation in front of them, and their eyes can't help but be more shocked. The storm is really coming. And in the face of such a storm, there was another hearty laugh between heaven and earth. Before the figure arrived, the laughter had turned into a rumbling echo, echoing in this world. The next second, another figure appeared here. This person was also dressed extraordinary, but he was a rare bald head, and he was still laughing when he came. Deputy Commander Yazan. I never thought that after so many years, the Deputy Commander's power has become even stronger. Now, he can threaten the lives of the entire tribe with just one word. Yazan's face darkened slightly. "Kuangxiao. Your Kuangzhan tribe has only interfered in this matter." Kuangxiao couldn't help but waved his hand. "Brother Yazan, you are wrong. How can this be called interfering? This is the wish of the people of the world. We are all one of the people of the world, this is our wish." Yazan snorted coldly, his face still solemn. Lan 11 has been watching coldly, with a cold face, without any emotional fluctuations. Seeing that the two kept silent, Lan 11 spoke at this time, "Is there any other rat who wants to jump out?" The faint voice was far less powerful than that of Yazan and Kuangxiao, but it still spread throughout the city of promise. And under this question, not long after, suddenly another faint smile came from the world. Ha ha ha! With such a grand occasion, how can Zhang still stand by and watch from afar? The people of the world are willing, Zhang will come forward and do his best to help. The man in gorgeous clothes emerged, and his body was also filled with the same divine emperor fluctuations. Although this man smiled lightly, his eyebrows still showed gloom, which, combined with the terrifying pressure around him, made him look even more gloomy. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 413. And after this person appeared, several more people appeared one after another. Together with the previous few people, there were 5 people in total. 5 divine emperors. 5 people in total, surrounding Lan 11 and Yi Zhan. At this moment, even Lan 11 and Yi Zhan couldn't help but change color slightly. Lan 11's pretty face was slightly cold, and she didn't speak at the first time. All kinds of thoughts flashed through her mind quickly. And Yi Zhan's face was extremely heavy, and his eyes were faintly red. Even when he spoke, he was gritting his teeth. The 8 tribes, except for my Xuanhuan tribe and the declining Yuxian tribe, the rest are actually gathered here. Great. You are really great. You are still hiding your cultivation. I used to worry about your inability to break through the Divine Emperor. Who would have thought that you would conceal your strength, plot secretly, and have wolfish ambitions? I ask you, has Lord Lindy ever done anything wrong to you? Why are you like this? Yi Zhan's hands were trembling slightly, and his eyes looking at the 5 divine emperors were extremely complicated. The people in front of him were all from the same era as him. He thought that with the appearance of Lord Lindy, the human race would finally be unified. Who knew that this group of people would be like this? In response to Yi Zhan's excitement, Gu Ling smiled lightly. What else does Deputy Commander Yi Zhan say? We just want to meet Lord Lindy. What does Deputy Commander Yi Zhan mean by stopping us like this? Still speaking nonsense in a hypocritical manner. A bunch of evil obstacles, Yi Zhan shouted brazenly, and even his eyes turned red. The pressure of the God Emperor around him suddenly spread out at this moment. It seemed that his anger could no longer be restrained and was about to rush to the 9th heaven. However, facing Yi Zhan in such a state, the 5 God Emperors on the opposite side did not show any nervousness, and even Kuangxiao raised his mouth with some disdain. Lan 11's pretty face was cold. You 5, I hope you can clearly know what you are doing. Gu Ling's eyes condensed. The Legion commander doesn't need to worry about it. We have made a choice long ago. Lan 11 couldn't help but narrow his eyes slightly. Sometimes, once a choice is made, there is no chance to change it. There is a price to pay for the choice. Have you really made a choice? Gu Ling's eyes did not change. Of course. Lan 11 said again. Then, what about the tribesmen behind you? Gu Ling paused, and even the other 4 people couldn't help but flash their eyes at this moment. There are no cowards in my tribe. My will is the will of the entire tribe, Kuangxiao snorted coldly. What about you? Lan 11 looked at the other 4 people. Gu Ling from the Gudao tribe, Zhang Hong from the Juyo tribe, Chang Sheng from the Changsheng tribe, and Yaming from the Yaowai tribe. The 4 God Emperors responded one after another. Lan 11 was silent for 2 seconds after hearing this, and then he couldn't help but sigh. In this case, Ardishan Palace has confirmed your attitude. I hope you don't regret it. Kuangxiao sneered. Regret? Do you dare to attack us? Lan 11 did not respond to him, but spoke again. I reiterate that Lord Lindi is not in Dishan Palace. Whether you believe it or not, this is the fact. As the voice fell, two space fluctuations suddenly emerged from behind him, one on the left and one on the right. The two people were actually at the level of God Emperor. They were the other two God Emperors of the Dishan army. With the appearance of the two, Yi Zhan couldn't help but move forward 2 steps, and the 4 God Emperors suddenly stopped in the air in front of Dishan Palace. It seemed that the posture of guarding to the death was conveyed like this. Even the people on the ground saw the clues at this moment. And facing such a posture, Kuang Xiao couldn't help but laugh again. Captain, it seems that you are missing one person. Lan 11's face did not change. So what? Gu Ling smiled. Nothing, I just hope that the commander will give way. We want to meet Lord Lindi. Lan 11 said lightly. Impossible. Gu Ling's expression was playful. Then don't blame us, we are bullying the few with more people. Since the commander of the army does not cooperate, we have no choice but to do this. Lan 11's expression did not change, and he continued to fight as if he was facing a great enemy. And at this moment, suddenly there was a voice that echoed here. It was not the voice of anyone here, but another voice that had not appeared before. Who gave you the courage to run to the front of the Emperor Tian Palace and bark like an orangutan? As these words came out, everyone here suddenly changed color. Another Dai Huang. Countless people stared at the surging space, trying to see clearly what kind of person suddenly appeared at this moment. The current promised city can be said to be a matter of urgency. And in the eyes of countless people, a young woman emerged. Her hair was flying and she was in high spirits. Chi Meng. At this moment, as soon as Chi Meng appeared, she moved to Lan 11's side and said loudly, when can a few dogs run to the public and bark? Kuang Xiao's face changed, and he said with a gloomy look, you dare to say it again. You are just a woman of Lindi, and you dare to treat us like this. Chi Meng sneered, so what if you treat me like this? Who do you think you are? If it weren't for the fact that Lindi's retreat could not be stopped now, you would be a corpse now. When it comes to Lin En, Kuang Zhan's expression suddenly stagnated, and he was forced to hold back. He can talk back to others at will, but he still doesn't dare to talk back to Lin En, even in the current situation. Under such circumstances, Gu Ling finally spoke again, Madam Lin. We all want to meet Lord Lin, can Madam Lin give us a favor? Chi Meng couldn't help laughing when she heard this, are you still pretending? What you are thinking, let alone us, I'm afraid the countless people below have already seen it. How can you be so thick-skinned and say such shameless words? Gu Ling's face suddenly sank, so, Madam Lin is not cooperating. Chi Meng snorted, sorry, you don't deserve it. They don't deserve it, I don't know if this emperor deserves it. The rumbling echo suddenly echoed in this world, and there was an aura that was not suppressed at all, sweeping across instantly, and a strong wind raged for a while, blowing over countless dresses. And under this momentum, a figure suddenly appeared here, and behind him, there was a layer of black cloud-like shadows whistling and following. Yi Zhan looked at it intently, and his face immediately changed color. This was not a shadow, but a creature of various races. And looking at the figure in the sky, Yi Zhan's pupils shrank even more. Priest. At this moment, Lan 11 and Chi Meng couldn't help but look at it intently, and some thoughts flashed through their minds like lightning. Finally here. He is here. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yi Tiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 414. Unlike Yazan, Lan 11 and Kimeng had known for a long time that the priest was probably on Earth, so they were not surprised at all by the scene before them. In fact, these two women are waiting for him to show up. Whether it was the late arrival of Kimeng or the delay in Lan 11's previous words, they all had this meaning. At this moment, seeing the priest standing high in the sky, Lan 11 couldn't help but a strong murderous intention flashed in her eyes, you are finally here. The priest was stunned for a moment, and then he said with a look of surprise, "So you are waiting for me? It seems that Emperor Lin knows me well enough." Lan 11's eyes showed a rare strong murderous intent. "In the past, I was a prisoner of the rank and file, and I relied on the mercy of Lord Lin to survive. Now I dare to call myself an emperor. If you say you are shameless, the whole world will be ashamed in front of you. Shame, only you, the priest, can be considered to be at the top." Hearing such a voice, the priest was stunned for a moment, and then he laughed. "It's interesting. You can say sarcastic words to this extent. You kid is really interesting." Kameng sneered. "Why, the bereaved dog in the past wants to be the master now." The priest's eyes narrowed. "The general trend of the world is changing, and you and others cannot stop this. Emperor Lin's decline is a foregone conclusion, so why are you still fighting here to the death?" Lan 11 suddenly became murderous. "Shut your stinking mouth. If you want to enter the Emperor Tiangong, just step over my dead body. No matter whether Emperor Lin is here or not, you can't even think about misbehaving in the Emperor Tiangong. When Emperor Lin comes out, you guys just wait to die. All of you are guilty of killing the 9 clan." The priest smiled and said, "In that case, there is no point in talking more. Everyone, let the show begin." Lan 11's murderous aura suddenly surged to the extreme, and she shouted in a deep voice, "Everyone, take care." After saying this, Lan 11 rushed away in an instant, aiming directly at the priest. There was something strange in the priest's eyes, and the divine emperor's aura around him instantly rose. His expression showed no sign of nervousness, but instead looked like he was taking a leisurely stroll in the courtyard. This is not because of his own fault, but because of the strength of the veteran God Emperor. Compared to others, it had been much longer since he entered the realm of the God Emperor. When speed and ice are fused together, and the power generated is promoted to the level of the God Emperor, what will it be like? In an instant, the entire world suddenly dropped to below zero. Fine snowflakes began to float, and the priest looked a little shocked. He obviously did not expect that the girl in front of him would move with such force. And the people below seemed to have seen a miracle. In an instant, the color of the sky and the earth changes, and the weather stirs up storms. What a powerful force this is! At this moment, Lan 11's whole body was filled with an unparalleled chill. In fact, after being promoted to the God Emperor, Lan 11 really didn't use her full strength. At this moment, as the color of the world changes, Lan 11's strength surges crazily, and the life will in her body shines brightly. For a moment, or even just half a moment, Lan 11's figure was clearly still where he was, but the face of the priest opposite him changed drastically in an instant, and he turned around and swung a palm behind him without hesitation. At this moment, Lan 11's figure was still there, but he could see that another Lan 11 appeared behind the priest, and struck the priest with a palm. It wasn't until the roar of this palm appeared that Lan 11's afterimage dissipated, but the priest's expression changed drastically at this moment. Not just ice, but also the law of speed. You actually have 2 laws. Lan 11 smiled disdainfully. How can you imagine Emperor Lin's wisdom and power? Before the words could even be finished, Lan 11's figure moved again, and it took another half an instant. Boom! The priest barely had time to react. When he was in danger, he twisted his body and swung his elbow back suddenly, and then he blocked another palm forcefully. At this moment, the priest was greatly annoyed, with a bit of horror and even helplessness flashing in his eyes. This kind of speed is something I have never seen before. After just 2 collisions, the priest already had a bad premonition in his heart. Even he could not keep up with this level. Even the mind can barely keep up, but the body is very reluctant. If this continues, there is no doubt that it will be difficult for him to support it. At this moment, the priest's panic surged violently, and the rich power of law instantly spread all over his body, guarding his body tightly like a shield. Lan 11 couldn't help but smile disdainfully. Is that so? A bereaved dog is a bereaved dog. No matter how much it jumps around, it's just a dog after all. The priest's face was heavy. What a shameless statement. Do you really think you've defeated me? Lanzisa raised her hand, and the rich ice attribute law spread immediately. In an instant, countless cold air flew away, like mist flying away. If you look closely, you will see that there are tiny ice beads inside. As the ice beads spread, the priest suddenly felt that his whole body movements seemed to become sluggish, and Lan 11 suddenly moved again at this moment. Boom! Violent roars began one after another, and Lan 11's figure disappeared and appeared from among them, and he began a continuous battle with the priest. The roars continued one after another, terrifying energy fluctuations erupted in the sky, and from time to time the furious roars of the priests could be heard. When Lan 11 and the priests started fighting, figures began to appear in the sky above the Emperor Tiangong. Surprisingly, they are members of the Emperor's heavenly army. At this moment, the Imperial Heavenly Army no longer has any national-level magic gods. All members are at the level of world-level magic gods, and demigods account for more than half. Although they did not have a god emperor, hundreds of demigods were still a terrifying force. These people seemed to be very clear about their mission. They had obviously received the order. As soon as they lined up, they rushed towards the distance. In that direction, there was a huge black shadow brought by the priest. The black shadow was a bit scary, and the number of troops inside must be considerable. However, the members of the Emperor's army did not show any fear. Instead, at the moment of the war, their eyes were filled with unimaginable excitement. Lan 11's previous words kept echoing in their ears, and Lin An's face appeared in their minds. These things turned into endless motivation, causing the Emperor's army to be murderous and crazy. It's just a matter of death, what's there to be afraid of? And below these people were the remaining god emperors. At this moment, Qi Meng looked at the people opposite, among whom the aura of the Mad Owl was the strongest and the expression was the most arrogant. Qi Meng raised her eyebrows. It's you, Guangxiao, right? Let me see how crazy you are. Come up with me. Qi Meng raised a playful smile, as if she was not worried about the upcoming battle, and flew high in another direction. Guangxiao was stunned, and a crazy aura gradually appeared in his eyes, as if he was really going crazy and wanted to fight. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 415. After Qi Meng and Guangxiao occupied a battlefield, the rest of the people began to choose their own opponents, and pairs of god emperors flew high into the sky. Fighting on the ground is tantamount to courting death. The newly built promised city will be reduced to ruins. The battle between god emperors is no joke. When there were only 3 people left on the field, suddenly a figure fell from the sky with a thunderous force. Its speed was too fast. In a blink of an eye, it had reached the ground and then crashed into a building not far from the Emperor Tian Palace. Among the remaining 3 people, one was the god emperor of the Emperor Tian army, and the other 2 were Zhang Heng and Yao Ming. At this moment, the 3 people couldn't help but change their expressions, and hurriedly looked at the mess that was still smashed into ruins. The countless people below also cast their eyes in, obviously wanting to see who would fall in such an embarrassing posture. Under the spotlight, a figure slowly rose from the ruins. It was the priest. At this moment, the priest's breath was a little disordered, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, obviously with a slight injury. Seeing the priest, everyone couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. It was only a very short time since the 2 began to fight, and the priest was blasted down. People couldn't help but look up at the sky. In the sky, Lan 11, who was wearing a leather jacket, was above the frost, and the fluttering corners of his clothes looked quite heroic. At this moment, Lan 11 looked at the people below, especially at the remaining Zhang Heng and Yao Ming, and then made a bold decision. With her cherry lips slightly opened, Lan 11's voice was still cold, but the words she spoke made countless people change color again. Zhang, come up, both of you together. The remaining emperor of the Ditian army couldn't help but be slightly startled, and then looked up at Lan 11 deeply. How could he not see the danger in Lan 11's decision? He clasped his fists solemnly and said, "Please take care, Commander. We will fight quickly and come back to support you." Lan 11 waved her hand, "Go, don't be careless, I won't die." Zhang grinned with a strange arc, and then looked at the priest. Almost at the same time, the two figures soared into the sky. Lan 11's eyes condensed, and a surge of fighting spirit rose up. 1 against 2, this kind of pressure will increase countless times. This scene, falling on the crowd watching the show below, has set off another uproar. The commander of the army wants to fight too. She is just a girl. As expected of the commander of the army, this courage is far beyond the reach of others. And under the attention of all the people, Lan 11 waved her hand. In an instant, thousands of miles were frozen. The unimaginable terrifying cold air spread out in an instant, forming a large area of extremely dense white mist. This mist is formed by countless ice crystals. The intense cold air spread out, and its range was so large that it even affected several other battlefields. After they saw Lan 11's situation clearly, their eyes could not help but shrink violently. As for Lan 11, the cold air was overflowing as if it had formed a unique domain, making her feel like a fish in water in such an environment. The priest and Zhang, who were lifted to the left and right of Lan 11, began to stir their breath the moment they entered the cold air domain. The strong wind was raging, and the violent law fluctuations rose from them. Not long after, Lan 11's cold air was forced away, as if it could not get close to the two of them at all. At the same time, the laws stirred by the two of them condensed more quickly, like a shield, protecting the two of them. Obviously, the priest had communicated with Zhang, and Zhang had already known the weirdness of Lan 11. The look in Lan 11's eyes did not change. Even in a one-on-two situation, she was still the attacking party. In an instant, the surrounding cold air rose and condensed, and soon reached a terrifying level. Lord Lindi has a world, and I, Lan 11, can also freeze the sky. A divine light flashed in Lan 11's eyes, and violent law fluctuations rose in his eyes. The next moment, ice suddenly condensed in the sky. It can be clearly seen that a thick layer of ice suddenly appeared in the cold air. The speed was simply terrifying. In just one breath, a huge ice ball was formed, wrapping all three people inside. From a distance, the scene was really spectacular. And inside the ice ball, the violent ice attribute law was running wildly. Both the priest and Zhang couldn't help but change color slightly at this moment. We can't let her go on. She's too fast. Looking at this huge formation, Zhang face was a little ugly, and a powerful law appeared when he waved his hand. But it was too late. Densely packed, countless ice cones, almost in an instant, actually covered the inner wall of this huge ice ball. At first glance, it was just like a hedgehog, countless. The next second, the countless ice cones burst out at an unimaginable speed. Her application of speed is too terrifying, Zhang shouted, and a sense of crisis spread throughout his body. The power of the law began to be wielded without regard for his life. Boom boom. The roar continued to sound from the two of them. The countless ice cones blessed with the law of speed had an extremely terrifying impact force. The law shields on the two of them were fluctuating violently, and they were obviously under terrible pressure. But surprisingly, under such a situation, the two of them could still hold on. Lan 11 sighed in her heart. This move was simply imitated from Lin En, but obviously, when she performed it, the power was equally fierce, but the destructive power was obviously not enough. At this moment, Lan 11 moved her body, stretched out her bare hands, and the law of ice attribute surged, and an extremely huge fist condensed out. The next moment, Lan 11's figure flashed, and she was behind the priest in an instant, and Lan 11's huge fist smashed directly at the priest. All this happened extremely quickly under the blessing of Lan 11's law of speed, but it was completed in an instant. The priest was struggling to hold on, and suddenly felt a crisis coming, and the next second, he realized what happened. "Asshole! Why are you staring at me?" The priest screamed shrilly, like a madman. In the crisis, the law fluctuations of his body condensed desperately, but he only managed to condense a small shield. Bang! With a little roar, the priest's small shield shattered at the moment of contact, and the huge ice fist hit the priest without any mercy. Puff! A mouthful of reverse blood spurted out, and the priest was smashed down from the sky like an ant under a huge mountain. Lan 11's eyes were stern, and his eyes glanced at Zhang Heng again. But the next second, Lan 11's face suddenly changed. A light green light curtain, surrounded in all directions at some point, formed a green shadow like a venomous snake, wrapping Lan 11 in it. Lan 11's face turned pale, while Zhang Heng on the opposite side smiled grimly. "You finally made a move, I was waiting for you." Lan 11's beautiful eyes shone, and a bad feeling rose in her heart. Zhang Heng made a move at the moment when Lan 11 made a move on the priest, and by the time she reacted, it was too late. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 416. Silks of green light penetrated. These strange lights had no visible effect, but they were undoubtedly unsettling. There is no doubt that this is definitely not a good thing. Zhang Heng smiled sinisterly, his eyes seemed to reveal a dim light, wanting to choose someone to devour. If you are hit by my poisonous snake shadow, just wait and die. If you struggle, you will lose the reputation of your legion commander. The more you struggle, the more excited I will be. Die in despair in the light of the shadow. Lan 11's face showed a hint of paleness. Until now, Lan 11 didn't know what the function of this poisonous snake shadow was. Poison. Or something else. Although she didn't know it, Lan 11 could feel that a strong feeling of weakness was spreading rapidly, and even the spiritual energy in her body was being consumed rapidly. What she couldn't see was that her eyes, which were originally pure, were now covered with a layer of worry. The violent ice attribute laws flew in all directions, whistling and trying to disperse the phantom, but it had no effect at all. Lan 11's eyes sharpened, and she subconsciously glanced in the direction of Zhu territory. Where are you? A sense of determination gradually rose from the bottom of her eyes, and Lan 11's gaze was gradually shrouded in murderous intent. As early as the moment she decided to take action, she knew that she might die in this battle. But as she said in the Emperor Tiangong, there is nothing more than a dead ear, so there is nothing to be afraid of. On the contrary, Lan 11 smiled a little freely. This shadow was like a weakening field, suppressing her power in all directions. But so what? The corner of Lan 11's mouth raised slightly, and her figure moved momentarily. Bang! After another half-breath, Lan 11's palm print instantly struck Zhang Heng's side, but the law barrier around Zhang Heng only caused a wave. Zhang Heng smiled disdainfully and slapped Lan 11 casually. Lan 11's expression remained unchanged, and she appeared on the other side of Zhang Heng in a flash. She not only dodged the palm, but also blasted towards Zhang Heng's back. Zhang Heng's expression changed, and the law barrier fluctuated violently, creating a strong wave, but in the end it still did not break. At this moment, Zhang Heng's expression became a little gloomy. What a difficult little kid. How can you still be so restless after being hit by my poisonous snake shadow? With a wave of his hand, Lan 11's shadow suddenly lit up, and the light shone brightly. And Lan 11 felt an even stronger weakening force at this moment. Lan 11's face changed slightly, and a little helplessness flashed in her heart. At this time, the figure of the priest appeared. The priest at this moment was quite embarrassed. The clothes were torn, the corners of the mouth were bleeding, and even the hair was disheveled. But at this moment, the priest looked a little excited, and he obviously knew what was happening in the sky. "Little boy, let me see how you still jump around." As soon as he came up, the priest's body surged with laws, and in an instant he condensed into a huge fist, which looked exactly like Lan 11's ice fist just now. Zhang eyes flashed, his hands suddenly came together, and strong law fluctuations rose from his body. At the same time, the phantom on Lan 11 suddenly revealed a strange brilliance, and two red lights seemed to appear on the head of the phantom, just like two eyes. Lan 11's expression changed, and she suddenly found that her whole body was stagnant, as if she was stuck in a quagmire, and it was difficult for her to break free even with her strength. "Priest, hurry up. This technique won't last long." Zhang Hong's voice sounded a little anxious. The priest looked stern and threw a big fist at Lan 11 without any hesitation. Lan 11 looked stern, she couldn't hide. The quagmire-like resistance restricted her movements. This attack could only be dealt with forcefully. The laws of ice attributes are condensed like crazy. Although it is difficult to move at the moment, the law of speed can not only move, but also all actions can be blessed by the law of speed. But in an instant, the same ice fist condensed from Lan 11's hand, and then flew towards the priest quickly. Boom! After the violent collision, Lan 11's ice fist cracked instantly and exploded into countless ice shards. On the other hand, the priest's fist only cracked a gap. Lan 11's expression changed. The weakening effect of the shadow on her was too obvious, and as time went by, this weakening power was getting stronger and stronger. At this moment, Lan 11 was anxious. She had no other choice but to condense an ice shield in an instant. She could resist it in front of her, but it was still difficult to withstand the force. The ice shield also exploded into slag, and she was even more bombarded. The whole person dropped hundreds of feet, almost close to the ground. As Lan 11 was pushed back, the red light in Lan 11's body suddenly disappeared. Above the sky, Zhang Hong released his palms and breathed slightly in his chest. It was obvious that it was extremely difficult to maintain the red light just now. Lan 11 felt her body recover, and a flash of ice flashed in her eyes. She rushed towards Zhang Hong in an instant. The speed was so fast that it was unimaginable. Boom boom. Violent roars suddenly resounded again. Not just here, the entire sky above the promised city has been divided into multiple battlefields, and roars came from high altitudes one after another. At the same time, the huge pressure of the God Emperor shrouded the entire promised city at all times, like a big stone weighing on the hearts of countless people. This is not one God Emperor, this is more than 10 God Emperors. The pressure of one divine emperor is heavy, let alone so many divine emperors combined. In addition, there is an area where the fierce shouting and killing are deafening. This is the battlefield between the emperor's army and the priest's subordinates. Compared with other areas, this place is a melee, bloody and extremely tragic, like hell on earth. The priest's subordinates, those tribesmen of different forms, obviously outnumber the emperor's army by a large margin. However, the iron-blooded army of the emperor's army seems to have the same will, and it seems extremely cruel. Time passed quietly in such a fight. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 417. Zhuzhu Territory. Lin An closed his eyes and sat quietly on the bed, without any fluctuations around him. Like an old monk in a temple, sitting quietly. If a god emperor appeared here, he would definitely be able to see through Lin An's current state at a glance. Demigod. After all these days, Lin An's realm has fallen from God Wasteland to God Emperor, and then to Demigod. If there is no solution, maybe it will continue to fall like this. As for this will of heaven and earth, Lin En has not been able to see the reason so far, and he doesn't know why, as a human being, Zhu territory has to be suppressed. It sounds very unfair. However, even so, Lin En's face is still very calm, and there is no emotional fluctuation, as if these things in front of him can't make his mood ripple. At this moment, Lin En seems to be sitting here, but his thoughts have drifted away, wandering to an unknown place far away. All his laws have been strongly suppressed, but his thoughts have not. His domain, a world, can still be used, because it is a domain formed based on his will. If the will is not destroyed, the domain will not disperse. However, the power of the domain is probably only 1/10 of what it is, because the fluctuations of the laws in the domain have been weakened, and there is not much attack power. Lin En's will has spread over an unknown distance. It is hard to imagine that the figure sitting here like an ordinary person has already spread its power for hundreds of millions of miles. Lin En has been in this state for a long time, a long, long time. Previously, after Lin En realized that he could not see through the will of heaven and earth, he no longer put his mind here, but cast his eyes to the depths of the universe. There, he once found some very interesting fluctuations. As Lin En's will wandered, some obscure fluctuations gradually emerged in front of his eyes. These fluctuations, in the past, were important things in the deep universe of Lin En, so he did not notice the situation here. Now, as Lin En's will carefully observed, he gradually began to discover that the essence of these fluctuations was actually laws. There are planets floating, seemingly rootless and invisible, but they are running in a specific orbit. There are stars burning, seemingly surrounded by flames, but in fact, they are all the laws of burning. These laws cannot be controlled by the will of the earth. Lin En's mind swept over, but the observation was very subtle, as if he wanted to see through something. The laws on the earth are all under the control of the earth, so are the laws in the universe also controlled by something? Is it the universe? Because the laws of the universe are controlled by other beings, the will of the earth cannot interfere with the laws of the universe. So, that existence must be at least at the same level as the will of the earth. Then when my own will is enough to compete with the will of the earth, will it no longer be suppressed by the will of the earth? Just like that, existence that is suspected to be the will of the universe. Lin En's mind was filled with deep doubts, and a strong sense of exploration was revealed. Lin En faintly felt that he seemed to have grasped something, but it seemed that he had grasped nothing. Earth. The war has lasted for a long, long time. Now in the sky, clear bloodstains can be seen everywhere. Lan 11, Qi Meng, the priest, and Kuang Xiao. No matter who they are, without exception, they are all stained with blood. There is no attempt or delay in their attacks, but a real fight to the death, to the death. This is a desperate battle. Under such circumstances, no one can be intact. In a corner of the sky, King Yin has arrived at some point and stood not far from the Emperor Tian Palace. Next to her is Ban Meng with a cold look. Ban Meng did not join any battlefield, but stood beside King Yin like a guard. King Yin, on the other hand, exuded a strong life wave, and a greenish glow filled the entire sky. Under such a glow, it can be seen that the Emperor Tian army did not suffer many fatal casualties. Although each of them was extremely embarrassed, the overall number of personnel was almost the same. The battlefields in other areas were relatively better, but there was only one battlefield that was in crisis. It was Lan 11. It can be said that if it were not for King Yin's appearance, Lan 11 would have been defeated long ago. No matter how powerful she is still a god emperor of the same realm. After being hit by Zhang Heng's venomous snake phantom, it was a miracle that she could hold on until King Yin arrived. At this moment, the cool leather jacket on Lan 11's body had long been broken into countless pieces and disappeared, leaving only a shiny black vest. Her long and flowing hair was now messy, and her beautiful face was morbidly pale. Especially in this paleness, the trace of blood flowing from the corner of her mouth brought the tragic aura to the extreme. In this battle, since King Ian and Banmen came, their eyes have been mainly focused on this place. 1 against 2 is enough for them to gather most of the aid forces. But even so, they can only deliver life energy. They are no longer god emperors and can't help at all. It is precisely because they can only watch, so they have seen Lan 11's tenacity since this battle, and the strong belief in her eyes that is almost glowing. They were shocked. What kind of belief can support this beautiful girl to fight to such an extent? At this moment, Lan 11 staggered, her body shook violently, and she coughed up a large mouthful of blood while covering her mouth. However, Lan 11 did not look at the blood on her hands. Instead, she looked at the opposite side with her eyes full of fatigue, and a tragic smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. How is it? 2 old guys. Have you seen how tough the Emperor Tianjun is? Opposite him, the priest had lost an arm, and there, even the sleeve was gone, and the shocking wound was exposed nakedly. And Zhang Heng's whole body was still intact, but his face seemed to have run out of blood, without the slightest blood color, and it was so pale that it was horrible. Facing Lan 11's words, the priest laughed miserably. So what? This emperor will see how long you can be tough. Today, you must die. Zhang Heng snorted coldly, without speaking, but his hands once again faced each other into palms and put them together. Swish. Immediately, the shadow on Lan 11's body glowed red again, and the quagmire-like resistance reappeared. The priest rushed directly, and his whole body was actually agitated at this moment, as if he had gathered the last bit of strength, and he slammed with his palm, and the momentum was far greater than before. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 418. Lan 11's face changed slightly. Not only Lan 11, but also Ban Meng and Qingyin, who were not far away, also changed their faces. This palm was completely different from the previous momentum. This priest had always been fighting with Lan 11, but he still had so much strength left. On the other hand, even with Qingyin's help, Lan 11 was no longer a god emperor, and even a demigod was on the edge. Qingyin could not do anything about the weakening of the venomous snake phantom, and only reduced some of the weakening effects. Therefore, Lan 11 was already at the end of his strength. Seeing the priest's explosive palm and the fierce look that was as fierce as burning everything, Lan 11 was stunned for a moment, and his eyes unconsciously glanced at the sky. That was the direction of Zhu domain. It was a long time, but in just a moment, Lan 11 smiled bitterly, although it was heroic, but also free and easy, and even condensed a cold palm print, and rushed towards the priest. King Ian and Banmen were anxious. Anyone could see that Lan 11 was just struggling desperately. The fluctuation of the cold palm print was much weaker than the explosion of the priest. But even so, the 2 women had no way to do anything. They could only watch Lan 11 rush towards the priest like a moth to a flame. Boom! There was a slight roar, and Lan 11's palm print lasted for a moment, but then it cracked into countless cracks, and then it shattered into countless fragments. At the critical moment, King Ian suddenly withdrew the fluctuation of the law of life in the whole venue, and condensed all the power instead. The rich green light instantly poured into Lan 11's body. At this moment, Lan 11's palm print was shattered, and the huge palm print of the priest hit Lan 11's bare hand. Puff! Blood flew everywhere. Lan 11 spurted out a mouthful of reverse blood, and the breath of the whole body instantly became weak, and the face was as pale as paper. Obviously, Lan 11 had been really hurt by this blow. The priest laughed grimly, and his figure came again, and his momentum was even more violent. It was obvious that he was ready to kill Lan 11 in one fell swoop. Lan 11's face was pale, and she saw the priest rushing over, but there was not much fear in her eyes. Instead, while her body was flying backwards, she once again looked up in the direction of Zhu. Emperor Lin, Lin En, Lan 11 tried her best. Lan 11's eyes were complicated, as if she felt guilty, reluctant, and mixed with all kinds of emotions. With a sigh, the fluctuation of space suddenly came, and a figure took a step forward and landed behind Lan 11, facing the direction where she was flying backwards, and caught her in his arms. The priest was startled, and in an instant, the figure that was charging stopped abruptly, and even retreated hundreds of feet away in an instant, and instantly retreated to the side of Zhang Heng, with a face full of vigilance. Lin En didn't look at them, but just looked at the pale and haggard face in his arms. "Why are you fighting so hard?" Lin En spoke softly, with complexities in his eyes. Lan 11 raised her face, looked into Lin En's eyes, and actually smiled. The bright red of the blood at the corner of her mouth was so dazzling that the smile looked extremely sad and beautiful, and Lin En's heart was trembling slightly. As if seeing through Lin En's state of mind, Lan 11 raised her hand, and I don't know where the courage came from, but touched Lin En's face. "For you. You once told me that you and your 3 wives have a deep connection. Lan 11 didn't have so many stories with you. When she met you, you were already the Emperor Lin. But it doesn't matter. Now, the opportunity has come. Even if you are the Emperor Lin, I have finally waited for the day when you need me. I can finally do something for you." The faint voice was so light that it seemed that a gust of wind could blow it away. Lin En trembled with his eyes and even his hands. The rich fluctuations of the law of life were transmitted. Lin En hugged Lan 11 in his arms. This scene fell into the eyes of King Ian not far away, into the eyes of Banmen, and into the eyes of Kimeng on the other side of the battlefield. Their eyes were a little complicated, but surprisingly, they didn't show any reluctance. They could see everything Lan 11 did. The green light gushed out from Lin En's body. These were all fluctuations of the law of life. Although these laws of life had little effect, and were not even as pure as King Ian's laws, Lin En still did it. After a few breaths, Lan 11's physical condition improved slightly. Lin En let her go and saw her slightly red face. But now her face was very bad, and the slight redness was hard to see clearly. Lin En handed her to King Ian. "Wait for me." Lan 11 nodded, with obvious joy in her eyes. She clearly felt Lin En's attitude. Lin En was accepting her. Lin En turned and looked at the priest. This was the first meeting between the two after the priest escaped. At this moment, the caution on the priest's face had disappeared, and he smiled and said, "Are you done with the nagging?" Lin En's face calmed down. "Are you ready to die?" The priest was stunned for a moment, and then he laughed. He saw that Lin En dared to stand here fearlessly. Of course he had seen through Lin En's state. Now Lin En only had the fluctuation of a demigod. Such a Lin En actually asked him how he was going to die. The priest laughed for a long time, then his face suddenly darkened, and he said angrily, "Emperor Lin, you are only a demigod now, and you dare to ask me how I plan to die? Do you think you are still the Emperor Lin of the past?" Lin En smiled lightly. "You are a prisoner. I spared your life at the beginning, but now you have the courage to run to me and shout. It seems that time has passed, and it has been so long that you, the priest, have forgotten how I got to the throne." Hearing this, the priest's face changed a little, and Lin En's momentum soared. "Back then, in the same realm, I could beat 3 of you alone. Now, you, the priest, have become a lonely man. What right do you have to fight me? Just relying on that waste beside you. Something that is not as good as the Lord of the Void can now become your ally? Priest, you really have lost the face of all the 4 monarchs." The priest's face suddenly twisted, and the one who was even more furious was Zhang Heng. Lin En's last 2 sentences were full of pearls, and he was scolding Zhang Heng. "How dare old dog Lin Di speak so arrogantly? He doesn't even know he's in a desperate situation, and he dares to come and mock me. See how I'll slap you to death." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 419. While speaking, Zhang Heng's face became even more furious, and he raised his hand and a green light and shadow rushed over. Lin An's expression remained unchanged, but he was alert in his heart. The culprit for Lan 11's fall from grace before was this green light and shadow. Although Lin An was in Zhuzhu, he knew everything that happened on earth. King Ian, Banmen, and even Kimeng appeared before, all at his suggestion. It was just that Lin An was experiencing his own perception, and he had already found out something that was hard to describe. This thing seemed illusory, but Lin An knew that it really existed. That was, will. Therefore, Lin An did not appear immediately, he still needed time. Now, Lin An's perception was still not complete, but seeing Lan 11's situation, he knew that he had to show up. At this moment, Zhang Heng's venomous snake shadow came, and Lin An shook his body, and the shadow passed by him. However, the phantom was controlled by Zhang Heng. Seeing Lin An evading, Zhang Heng's expression condensed, and he sneered and controlled the phantom to follow again. Lin An's face was calm, and the purple and black gold in his eyes were shining brightly. A mysterious wave suddenly spread from Lin An's body. Lin An's aura did not increase at all, but everyone here could not help but focus their eyes on Lin An in an instant. Everyone suddenly had a feeling in their hearts, as if at this moment, something terrible was awakening in Lin An's body. As Lin An moved, the aura began to rise. Not long after, Lin An suddenly raised his hand and waved. The wind is coming. Lin An's expression was condensed. If you look carefully, you can find that there is a very rare persistence in his eyes. As Lin An waved his hand, the wind, from nowhere, began to rise and fall. The whistling sound gradually began to howl, and it became louder and louder. At this time, there was a force that seemed to start from the distant sky and suddenly crushed down in Lin An's perception. It was will. No one present was aware of this breath, including every god emperor here. Will is something that can only be touched at the level of God wilderness. In this world, no one except Lin An can feel that will. However, in Lin An's perception, the breath of that will was particularly obvious. It was a will that was as ruthless as the mighty power of heaven. Under the crushing of this will, the hurricane that had just risen here seemed to have signs of dissipating. It was as if someone didn't want the wind to blow. At this moment, the purple gold light in Lin An's eyes suddenly became stronger, and there was an unparalleled momentum rising from Lin An's body. This momentary change was clearly perceived by everyone here. In their eyes, Lin An seemed to have risen infinitely in an instant. No matter what you are, if this emperor wants the wind to rise, the wind must rise. Even if you are the will of heaven and earth, you must get out of here. The vast shout, like the sound of thunder, rumbled in this moment, and spread to an unimaginable distance in an instant. The entire promised city was completely enveloped in an instant, and then spread to the distance again, and finally, it spread to the entire world. At this moment, countless people felt a little shocked. This voice might have a similar effect on them, but the unparalleled momentum contained in it was the only one they had ever seen in their lives. What a great spirit! And under the spread of this voice, a will also quietly grew here. Compared with the omnipresent will of heaven and earth, it was like a lone boat in the sea. Under the huge disparity, it was almost invisible. However, the appearance of this will was like an indestructible rock, and it stood firm in the surrounding ocean will. The wind here, under the maintenance of this will, stopped dissipating and began to expand more and more. Whoosh! The strong sound of the wind began to whistle, getting louder and faster. In the end, many demigods here felt their skin hurt. However, this is not the end. The wind is still expanding. After a few breaths, Even the several emperors in the sky felt a huge pressure. Above the sky, Lin En was full of momentum, and the purple gold light in his eyes became stronger. There was even a hint of enlightenment flashing from the depths of his eyes. Rain is coming. With another wave of his hand, Lin En's will emerged again, and followed by a few drizzling raindrops. However, in just a moment, the drizzling drizzle began to surge and turned directly into a downpour. Thunder is coming, lightning is coming. Lin En was in high spirits, raised his hand again and waved it, saying it twice. Rumbling thunder began to sound from deep in the sky, and there were streaks of lightning that climbed up the sky like a spider web. Wind, rain, thunder, and lightning, all coming together. The light in Lin En's eyes became brighter and brighter, and even more terrifying was that the fluctuations in his body were also getting stronger. He had originally fallen to the edge of demigod, but now he was actually in the middle of demigod. This is the will of heaven and earth, and my will. Lin En muttered to himself, with thousands of insights rapidly forming in his mind. In the past, he also controlled the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning with a single thought, but the laws of the essence of wind, rain, thunder, and lightning were not his, but the laws controlled by the will of heaven and earth. Even if he created, the laws he created were still the laws under the will of heaven and earth. Therefore, when the will of heaven and earth began to intervene, Lin En's previous methods were inevitably suppressed in an unimaginable way. Just like he had used someone else's stick to fight the enemy, and now his stick was taken away by the original owner. And the most essential reason for this is will. In the past, when Lin En was in the godly wilderness, he sensed the existence of will, but the laws he controlled at that time still belonged to the will of heaven and earth, which was not the true power of will. Now, Lin En has touched the eternal, and only in the eternal stage can he have a true understanding of will and can exert the true power of will. And now, although Lin En's actual cultivation has not reached the level of eternal, he is doing what the eternal did. The wind, rain, thunder, and lightning just now were Lin En's first experiment. And obviously, Lin En's experiment was successful. Although the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning had only just reached the level of the Divine Emperor, there was no doubt that he had already initially escaped the control of the will of heaven and earth. This was because the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning just now were truly formed under his will, and were the power of him, Lin En, and even the will of heaven and earth could not suppress it. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 420. Just like why the laws in the universe exist but the earth cannot suppress them, it was something that belonged to the will of the universe at that time. But now, the product of Lin En's will, the will of heaven and earth is also helpless. The light in Lin En's eyes was stronger than ever before. This feeling was really addictive. Lin En knew that when he could control all his laws freely, that would be the time when he would advance to eternity. At this moment, seeing the phantom of the poisonous snake behind him still chasing him, Lin En raised his hand and waved. Collapse. The supreme will followed closely, and the wave of collapse was quietly generated. The next second, the phantom began to collapse. The wave of collapse was not very strong at first, but as Lin En's will became stronger and stronger, the wave of collapse became more and more terrifying. In the end, it turned out to be powerful, more than 100 times more powerful than when it first appeared. Lin En still attaches great importance to Honkai in his heart, so he has more understanding of Honkai. Seeing the venomous snake's shadow shatter into ashes in just a moment, Xuanhuan couldn't help but look a little horrified. As a spellcaster, he felt it most clearly. What was that then? That was the collapse. As a result, Xuanhuan's face suddenly turned pale, and his outstretched fingers were trembling slightly. That's. The priest looked solemn. Honkai. Xuanhuan's expression became more and more ugly, and finally turned into panic. He suddenly turned around and screamed loudly at the priest with a crazy look on his face. Priest! Didn't you say Emperor Lin was suppressed? What's going on? The priest was stunned for a moment, and then his face turned ugly. What are you calling for? If Emperor Lin was not suppressed, you wouldn't even have a chance to take action. Emperor Lin is at the peak of Xuanhuan. Do you know Xuanhuan? Zhang Hong was stunned for a moment, and then he thought that the fluctuations in the realm in front of Lin An were not comparable to those of Xuanhuan, and were even weaker than them. But if this is the case, why does Lin An still have such power? Then why is he now? Before he finished speaking, the priest interrupted him a little irritably. Does this need to be said? Lin An must have used some method to get rid of part of the suppression of heaven and earth. When he first appeared, he didn't have such strength. It's obvious that his methods are still being tested. We may have become his whetstone. Zhang Hong suddenly looked ferocious. Asshole. The priest's face became a little heavier. We can't continue. We must defeat him in one fell swoop before he completely recovers his strength, otherwise we will be the ones who die. Zhang Hong also figured out the key, and now he screamed hysterically, Emperor Lin. You must die today. Don't even think about putting pressure on us again. Humanity does not need an emperor. Lin An's expression was calm. It wasn't until the two people finished their discussion that he calmly spoke calmly. Are you done discussing it? When you're done discussing it, you can go and die. Lin An raised his hand and waved, and his will suddenly became overwhelming. And in front of him, a total of 2 black gold swords appeared. This sword, when Lin An was at his peak, could become billions in a single thought, but obviously it is far from that level now. However, it won't be long before he recovers. As Lin An's will became stronger and stronger, 2 black gold long swords appeared in front of Lin An again, then 2 more, and 2 more. The first 2 appeared, and they rushed towards the priest and Zhang Hong respectively. After these 2 swords, a new long sword followed, and then a new long sword. From this, Lin An's long sword continued to take shape, and 2 torrents of purple and gold long swords began to appear in front of him, one after another, endless. The priest's expression changed, and a ruthless look flashed in his eyes. Here we come. Success or failure depends on this one move. Don't hold back anymore, fight with your last resort. As he spoke, the priest raised his palm, and a dignified pressure began to form on his body, while his palm gradually lit up with brilliance. As the priest's pressure became stronger and stronger, his face began to turn pale. You know, even if the priest broke his arm, his face did not change at all, but now, his face turned pale. As the priest's expression changed, the brilliance in his palm began to become brighter and brighter. On the other side, Zhang Hong took a deep breath and also raised his palm. At his level, it is naturally impossible not to resort to desperate means. As Zhang Hong raised his palm, his entire arm began to glow with a green light. This brilliance was generated extremely quickly, and in an instant, it had condensed into a phantom. It was a huge green snake. The phantom of the big snake hovered over his entire arm, and the snake's head extended slightly from the palm of his hand. There was a strong coercion in the open mouth of the snake. In this moment, the 2 divine emperors actually launched their tactics to suppress the bottom of the box at the same time. Lin An's expression remained unchanged. He didn't seem to notice the movements of the priest and Zhang Hong. He just kept condensing the black gold sword. Originally, only 2 black gold long swords appeared at a time, but now 4 can appear at the same time. And the torrent of swords in front of Lin An also turned into 4. The appearance of the scene fell in the eyes of the people around him, in the eyes of the people below, and even more in the eyes of the surrounding god emperors. Even several pairs of god emperors stopped fighting and turned to look at Lin An and the 2 men confronting each other. After all, they knew clearly that the only one who could decide the direction of this dispute was Lin An, and they were just foils. After all of this was only aimed at Lin An. At this moment, the attacks of the 2 peaks finally began to collide head-on. Bang! Lin An's gathered long swords, but in an instant, they actually shattered directly. However, the priest and Zhang Heng were obviously also affected by the collapse, and their offensive slightly dissipated. Then, there was the second long sword, and the third long sword. Boom boom boom. The deafening violent collisions continued to appear in the sky, and Lin An's long sword continued to shatter into countless fragments and dissipated. In the blink of an eye, it had shattered hundreds of them. Seeing this scene, countless people secretly smacked their lips in astonishment, and subconsciously worried for Lin En, but the faces of the priest and Zhang Heng became increasingly ugly. Others were just watching the excitement, but they were in the center of the battle, and only they knew how great the pressure was.